The big news, of course, is that Friedrich Merz of the CDU has triumphed in the German elections that took place on Sunday, 28.6% share of the vote. The AfD, the far right, doubling their performance on their last election to 20.8%, coming in second place. The SPD of Olaf Scholz, worst performance in almost a century at 16.4%. The Greens and the left were able to get past the 5% threshold, but the BSW, FDP, and others fell below the 5% threshold. Let's talk to Economist Shaun Richards, who joins us from the United Kingdom, on what this means for the largest economy in the Eurozone. Shaun, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We saw the euro strengthen after the results in Germany. In your view, is this result encouraging for Germany's economic prospects?
Well, the main problem for Germany, in my view, has been its energy policy, which is pursued for more than a decade now and has left its economy uncompetitive. So there's a real problem there for it. On the other side of the coin, I think that the euro is also strengthening because there's been some news out of the European Central Bank that previously was suggesting that interest rates might go to 2% or lower. Now there seems to be some doubt about that. So as well as the election news this morning, there's a sort of couple of big other factors in it. One is the future path for interest rates. And the second, as I said earlier, is really quite a mess that Germany's got itself into on its energy policy, which has meant that electricity prices are very high. And what was a strength for the German economy, manufacturing, has become a bit of a handicap. Just to give an idea, for manufacturing was about 20% of the economy as opposed to 10% here in the UK or 10% in France. But energy prices are chopping back on that. And Germany's deindustrializing. So this is really a big shift here because Germany was considered the sort of power zone, the engine, however you want to put that, of the euro area. And now it's struggling. So that's the real test for the new government. What can it do?
Now, thank you for that. Looking at the results, there are a number of political parties that didn't make the 5% threshold, which means, I guess, that the CDU, CSU won't have to bargain with too many interests in a coalition. Is that a good thing in your view?
I think so. Although, remember, the European system is around coalitions. We in the UK don't really tend to do that very often. We tend to have a government, whether we like it or not, but set in a government. The issue with it here is, of course, that you then get so much bargaining. And like I was saying before, Germany with its economic policy really needs to get on with things. And if it takes time forming a coalition, then it has a problem, doesn't it? And these things tend to give more or less the same policies as before. That's the risk.
Now, you did mention energy. There are a number of hurdles facing Friedrich Merz. There's the debt brake, tax cuts, deregulation. You've mentioned energy costs, immigration, Trump's tariffs. Do you think he can, him and his coalition can navigate their way through with respective policies?
I think that there are various issues here, but I think the main one that Germany needs to shift on is energy because it's such a slow mover. They decided, for example, to close their nuclear plants. As I understand it, reopening them will take 2 or 3 years, should they take that route. So it takes a long time to do that. I think that's number one. Another issue that you did mention that's on the cards is the debt brake. For those that don't understand it, Germany restricts itself to only borrowing 0.35% of GDP a year under certain conditions. Whereas Germany does have scope to borrow more, its debt's relatively low. And this is one of the issues that's gone on throughout the euro era, which is one of the arguments is Germany exports, which is good, but its domestic demand's weak. So they could be more French, if you like, borrow more and try and get some economic growth that way. And that would also boost the other euro area economies. But this is an argument now that's gone on since the credit crunch, so 15, 16 years. So there's a lot of deep problems here for Germany.
Speaking of those deep problems, there's a couple members of the business community that spoke out after the elections. I just wanted to read these quotes to you and get your reaction to them. So One of them is from one of the largest unions, Christian Benner, who's the chairwoman of the IG Metall, says industry and employees do not have months to wait for clear prospects. Many industrial companies, especially in energy-intensive industries and in the supply industry, are up to their necks in water. She continues with that quote saying that competitive energy costs, you've already mentioned that, the ramp up of electromobility and investment in education, roads, railway, and digitization should be at the center of a new German government's plans. And then we've got the president of the Association of Family Businesses in Germany, Marie-Christine Ostermann, saying this election result is a clear mandate for an economic turnaround. Without better economic policy, Germany is threatened with dramatic economic and political conditions. She continues by saying deindustrialization will accelerate, the wave of insolvencies will become even greater, and the sale of family-owned businesses will continue to increase. We are heading dangerously towards the tipping point. Is it that gloomy, Shaun?
I think that there are issues here. I like to use songs sometimes as an example, and this feels like this hit by Europe called The Final Countdown, that Germany now has a chance after the election to try and move forwards. But some of these, like as I was saying before, are really deep-seated issues. For the unions, this must be genuinely difficult because Germany's facing unemployment, perhaps, in a way that it hasn't for a very long time, because it's been perceived as a success. The manufacturing certainly has been. And now there are all sorts of challenges to this. If we go beyond their borders, for example, the push by China into electric vehicles challenges Volkswagen, Mercedes, Porsche, and so on. So there's a whole range of problems this time round, whereas Germany used to be quite often facing opportunities rather than problems. So in general, I agree with that. The issue is, can the political class change and give Germany a sort of change of direction, change of plan, and move away? Because you see, these problems are ongoing. For those that don't follow, the electricity issue has been particularly poor this winter. And actually, it's not been the weather. In general, it's been mild. So that poses a question of what electricity prices would do if we actually had a hard winter in Europe. And I see these things as being, you see, when something happens like this, businesses don't tend to respond immediately. It takes several years. They think, oh, okay, we'll hang on for a bit and then move on. And this is the problem for Germany now. This has gone on for a while. So we could see things slip away faster. So they need action quickly, I think. But will they do it? That's the question.
Would you single out red tape as Europe's biggest issue, holding back a favorable business environment?
Well, I think that it is also a factor. I think this is the issue of regulation. The debates come up recently on the success in the United States of NVIDIA as a share, to quote, or AI. That whole area in the US economy has done very well. And I think the European elite have come to realise that their regulation and bureaucracy stop that. For example, the US tech companies, they've kept fining them. I'm not saying the US tech companies haven't done things wrong, but that sends the wrong message. But then that's another area above Germany, which is the Euro area, the European Union, and regulation there. And that's part of the problem. They've chosen a structure where they've got lots of different levels. And so how can they cut back on the red tape? They like to say it, but it's the same people that imposed it usually.
Finally, Shaun, what's your outlook for the Eurozone? You got the Trump tariffs, you got all these other geopolitical concerns and you know, the election outcomes in France, now Germany. How do you see things panning out? I mean, also in the UK, you've got, you know, Rachel Reeves and the tax matters out. I know the UK is not part of the Eurozone, of course, but I guess for the EU, what's your outlook? How do you see things panning out there?
Well, some of the factors between the UK and Europe are the same. I think that there's stagflationary issues. Both places have seen higher inflation. For example, the UK has ticked up to 3% on the number the Bank of England targets. Euro area 2.5%. So inflation, yes. And growth, I'm afraid, looks weak. I've run a thing on Italy for quite some time, calling it the girlfriend in a coma, that it never grows by very much. And that is around about 1% a year. It's about as good as it gets on average in the better times. And that looks like Europe now. That's the problem. Stagflation and stagnation. I'm sorry, it's not a very nice message, but that's where it is. That's where we are. And it needs an actual policy change to move that on, I think.
Shaun Richards, it's always a pleasure talking to you about the UK, about the Eurozone, and so much more. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking to us in the Global Business Report.